Ariel Sharon's body was moved out of the medical center near Tel Aviv where he's been treated. For many Israelis, he was a hero. Some, though, saw him, especially in the 1980s and 90s, as a dangerous maverick. For Palestinians, he was always a villain, often called the Butcher. Sharon called his autobiography Warrior. That was how he saw himself. Tributes were paid by Israel's leaders.
He was an outstanding man and an exceptional commander who moved his people and loved them, and the people loved him. He cultivated his land and made it flourish.
Ariel Sharon was a veteran of Israel's independence war of 1948. In 1953, his men led a reprisal here in the Palestinian village of Kibbutz on the West Bank after an Israeli woman and her 2 children were killed by Palestinians. Sharon's men blew up most of the major buildings. He said he thought they were empty. In fact, 67 Palestinians, including many women and children, died in the rubble of their homes. In 2006, when Sharon went into a coma, this survivor of the raid told me that Palestinians would always regard him as a killer and a criminal.
Sharon will never be a man of peace because he's committed so many massacres. We don't rejoice over him dying, but to us, he'll always be a killer and a criminal.
But for Israelis, he was a daring fighter, leading an audacious paratroop attack during the 1956 Middle East War. In the 1967 war, he led forces that captured large parts of Egypt's Sinai Desert. In the 1973 war, his men crossed the Suez Canal and encircled an Egyptian army. In 1982, as Minister of Defense, he was the mastermind of Israel's invasion of Lebanon. Hundreds, perhaps several thousand Palestinian civilians in Sabra and Shatila refugee camps in Beirut were massacred by Lebanese Christian militiamen who were Israel's allies. Ariel Sharon was found to hold personal responsibility by an Israeli commission of inquiry and resigned. But he rebuilt his political career. He was a major force behind Israel's drive to settle Jews in the occupied Palestinian territories. As he pushed to become leader of the Israeli right in 2000, he made a highly publicized, heavily guarded visit to the Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem, providing the spark for the second Palestinian uprising. With Palestinian suicide bombers attacking Israelis, Ariel Sharon became prime minister, presiding over a tough military response and the construction of a fortified barrier between Palestinians and Israelis. One of the what-ifs of recent Middle Eastern history is what might have happened had Sharon not been incapacitated by a massive stroke 8 years ago this month. 6 months earlier, he'd pulled Israeli settlers and soldiers out of Palestinian Gaza, a move for which he was condemned by many of his old allies on the Israeli right. Some Israelis believe he might have been the only man trusted enough to pull some settlers out of the West Bank too. By then, many Israelis saw him as the grandfather they could trust with their security. But Palestinians never reconciled themselves to the man or his legacy. Ariel Sharon's family visited the place on his farm where he's expected to be buried. His legacy is still a factor in the politics of war and peace in the Middle East, especially the Jewish settlements on the West Bank. Respect him or despise him, Ariel Sharon could not be ignored, in life or death. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.